we have a number of apologies, so hence a few empty seats, but that will come out when Debbie informs us. Can I welcome you all to today's meeting? I know quite a few of us didn't get our papers till Tuesday, but it was electronically circulated. So if you're happy with that situation, I'm happy with it. We can move on. Is that okay? Yeah. We'd all less time to read the papers, but apart from that, I think we knew what we were coming from the electronic mail. Oh, lovely. Brilliant. I understand from Debbie that there is issues at the printing works, and they have had a lot of cases of COVID. Okay, can we move on then to the agenda? I'm ready to begin, Debbie, when you are.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press and the public. Under agenda item 3, there are no late items of business that I'm aware of. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interest they may have? I'll take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, apologies for absence have been received from councillors Campbell and David Blackburn. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. We've skipped a few stats, but you know what it is anyway, don't you? So we'll move straight on to item number 6, which is minutes of the previous meeting, 24th of February. Can I go through this usual way, page by page, starting at page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, finally page 16. Can we agree them as a true and correct record? Okay, moving on then. Matters arising. I see no hands, so there are no matters arising. Can we then go to agenda item number 8? I've got 7 here. Where's that? 7. It is 7, is it? Yeah, I've skipped it. Item 7. You doing this? Come in when you're ready, please. And can I say that we do have Brian here, so obviously you will have questions for him, and I'll bring him in when Daljit is introduced it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members will recall this proposal from September last year. It was an application for 322 flats to be provided in 4 blocks with undercroft car parking and landscaped amenity space. And there's a visual on the screen showing the development from East Street next to the listed church building there. Now, at the time, members will note from the report and recall that the proposals had been the subject of a financial viability case. The financial viability case was agreed by panel in September last year on the basis that the development would provide 18 discounted rent units. The development's a build to rent proposal. In addition, at the time, the applicant had offered to agree to reassess the financial viability case of the scheme upon practical completion. And if the viability position had improved, then they would have committed to providing additional affordable housing up to the maximum amount required by our policy. This offer was to form the basis of an overage clause in the Section 106 agreement. And the decision in September last year was to defer and delegate the approval subject to completion of the Section 106 agreement. Unfortunately, since last September, we have not been able to conclude the Section 106 agreement. The applicant has advised that they now cannot agree to the overage clause. The reasons are detailed in the report, but in summary, the position put to us is that the anticipated building construction costs have increased significantly since last year, and they're predicted to increase further this year. Also, since the viability submission, changes in legislation means that sprinklers and misting systems are mandatory for fire safety reasons for this type of development. And that is predicted to add £612,000 to the cost of the development. Also, the applicant has undertaken initial dialogue with professional advisors with a view to securing prospective investors for the development. This has identified a concern that the project will not secure interest from a funder with an overage clause. The applicant has said that they remain committed to delivering the 18 affordable units and committed to delivering the site. However, for the reasons I've just summarised, they can't commit to the overage clause. Officers have taken advice from Brian Maguire, who represents the district valuer and is here to answer any questions that members may have. And Brian has advised that the offer of 18 affordable units still remains an acceptable viability position. Also, I'd like to advise members that although an overage clause was offered by the applicant and accepted in this case, the council's planning policy does not require such a clause within the agreement. So in conclusion, it's considered that the insistence on the overage clause is now likely to hamper attempts to deliver the overall development. This is a site that's been vacant for a long time. It's had previous iterations for planning which haven't come forward. There is a prospect because of the current economic climate that this will come forward because we're in a development cycle, as members will be aware. So therefore, officers are recommending that we agree to completion of the Section 106, but without the previously offered overage clause. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Daljit. It might be good to bring the district valuer in at this stage, and he will be available for further questions, as will officers. Brian, please.
Thank you. Just to add a couple of other points on to what Daljit said. We first started looking at this scheme in 2019, and I don't know if any of you recall, but we did have a meeting where we did feel that there was a potential to get more affordable out of it, and that was achieved by increasing the density, wasn't it, Daljit? So the developer went away. There was some design issues as well where the council, the members weren't too happy with the look of the building and one thing and another. So I think there was a design meeting. Anyway, the outcome of that was that they came back with a new scheme, which I have reviewed, and they've offered 18 units. I struggled to get to such an optimistic view of 18 units. And what that means is when I appraised the scheme, I still couldn't see how they were in a position to be, I use this word carefully, sort of generous in terms of their offer. So my advice at the time was, accept the offer because I think it's a good offer at 18. And then to reiterate the point that Daljit made, I think it was effectively in the meeting that the applicant offered an overage clause. So we went away after the meeting to look at the overage clause. We did enter into discussions and negotiations, but when it came to the level of profit at which the scheme would generate an overage, we couldn't reach an agreement. I'd always appraised the scheme at 8% profit on cost, and the applicant had a higher figure in mind at 15%. Now, when I sat back and looked at the situation and looked at the construction costs when we appraised the scheme in 2020, and I see what's happened to construction costs in the interim, I can't see, my independent professional view is that even if they agreed to my profit trigger level at 8%, I'd struggle to see if the overage provision would actually benefit the city and the contribution towards affordable housing. And I just wanted to re-emphasize the fact that they've offered a number, even though it's relatively low against what we'd normally see in terms of affordable at 5%. I still really couldn't get to those numbers. So in the round, I think it's an acceptable offer in the circumstances, and I'd be nervous at having to look at it again in the current climate. You may not get as good a result. So.
Thank you, Brian. Invite questions from members. I saw Dan's hand first.
Thank you. It's a question for the district valuer, really. If you could just clarify, you said that your numbers didn't get there. What would your numbers have got us to?
When I'd previously assessed the scheme, I'd got to 8 affordable units, and when I reassessed the additional units, that I think there was an extra floor, or they'd reconfigured to provide a higher number over and above 322. I think I was getting to somewhere like 12, if I'm perfectly honest.
So thanks. So if we'd have been sat here today and that would have said 12, am I correct in saying your professional advice would have been that that is actually the correct level, and that this 6 is effectively an overage by another means that's effectively built in to our advantage, or to the city's advantage, as we sit here now?
Yes, I think you're correct. If all things remain the same, if the costs remain the same as they were, I think it's very fairly put that in a way you could consider it that way as an average.
Thanks, Brian. Neil, please.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Collins asked it's effectively the same set of questions, so yeah, I'm satisfied.
I see no hands. Okay, is anybody prepared to move officers' report then? Or do you want to make a comment? I think the comments is. Thank you. And there's a second. Okay. All those in favour then of removing the overage clause from the application, please show. Yeah. I think that's clear. That's unanimous. Thank you. Not a unanimous no. Did you vote against? Sorry? Okay, no, I didn't, but I thought I couldn't see you behind Caroline, actually. Okay, so is that an abstention then? Kaylee, is that an abstention or an against? Okay, that will be recorded. Moving on then to pre-app agenda item number 8. And that will be a surprise, I guess, to developers that we've got through here so quickly. So we'll give them a couple of minutes. Okay, can we move on to agenda item 8, starting on page 101? Do you want to introduce it very briefly, Tim? And then we'll bring in the applicants. Okay, can we resume the meeting, please? Tim, when you're ready.
Thanks very much, Chair. This relates to a pre-application proposal for a build-to-rent apartment scheme on Skinner Street. Some members visited site this morning and had a good look around, but I don't want to steal applicants' thunder. We've got Tom and Christian here to present the scheme. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Chair, members. Tom Cook from Xerum, planning consultants who've been working with Ridgeback, who are the owners of the sites. I've got Christian Gillam here, the architects from Leach Roads Walker, and Christian will take you through the scheme that we're putting before you today.
Thank you. So unfortunately, our client's not able to be with us today. They are very busy and very active build to rent and development and operating company. I'm just going to do their very quick intro. They are working across the country on multiple schemes. They've got a fantastic track record in delivery, so they're not just there to buy a site, get planning, and then move on. They deliver and operate. They're very well funded by various funding sources, so the funding is already in place. And they also JV with contractors who we've been working with to develop the scheme to present to you today. So what we're presenting, to the best of our knowledge, is completely deliverable. So I won't dwell on their slides. I can come back and answer any questions. Our design proposal, obviously, for a build to rent scheme, mix of apartment types, 1, 2 and 3 bed. And as you know, the site, I'm sure you all know it very well, it's on a major gateway entry point into the city centre from Wellington Street. I'll come on to this a bit later in the presentation, but we've obviously tried to achieve and have achieved all of your benchmark standards across a whole range of categories. So that includes energy, sustainability, accessibility, and NDSS compliant. The building is a tall building. It says 30 there. I think it said 31 on the presentation. In a location that has previously had a consent for a tall building, but we think there's justification for the proposal that we're presenting today. So some key principles are brought up on the slide there. As I said, the slide is on that junction from, I call it the inner ring road. I've been corrected, can't remember the road number, but that entry point as you come down Wellington Street into the city centre. So we've looked to put a focal point on that corner that addresses that arrival and gateway into the city. We've got active and animated ground floor that will greet people as they come in or out of the city, wrapping around that corner. And then we've generated potential new pedestrian routes from that building to connect into obviously future development that's proposed around this area, but obviously into the existing streets. We're looking to embellish the space around the perimeter of the building within our site, and we're in discussions to see what opportunities there are to extend that onto Westgate, where there are proposals to improve with new pedestrianisation and cycle links. So as a building, it fully integrates into its context, and we think addresses that gateway building into the city. So this, I've got a series of floor plans and I'll try and be very brief on these. So the key active area in the main entrance to the building is in the red corner, which forms this sweeping curve that brings you in around the site and into the city. And then the ancillary facilities, these days there's a lot of them, sprinklers, cycles, bins, are sort of tucked away on around onto Skinner Street in the grey and the blue areas. The building does have 2 entrances and 2 cores, which access the upper floors independently, but the idea is people enter via build-to-rent ancillary facilities, the red area. First floor, that accommodation to give you that 2-story dynamic active frontage looking out and seeing people inside doing things is the red area on the corner. So that build-to-rent amenity is in the red. Cycles are in the yellow, so we're fully compliant with the cycle provision. And then the apartments start on the upper floors. They're color-coded for the different apartment types. So green is 3 beds, blue is 2, and then there's a turquoisey color for the 1 beds. So the buildings and all the apartments face out. They address the boundaries. We've been very careful in terms of our relationship with Ebor Court. We don't have windows overlooking that boundary on the basis that something could come forward on there, but there's opportunities to look out there if that became an area of open space. So our buildings passively survey all the outward streets from the upper level. What I should have said on the previous slide is there's a route over 10 stories at the lower level, this cut through. So an extension of Skinner Street where we can come underneath the building and through and out onto Westgate. And then on the upper levels, that then joins and completes the building form. Quite hard to describe this on plan, so we'll come through to the visuals. So our design of this building has taken in several factors, but wind as well as our outlook. We've also completed TVIA views. We've been 2 wind tunnel tests. But our design really was we've done a whole series of massing views, and I'll fly through these because these are fairly hard to work out, but we've analysed the site from a range of viewpoints and now looking at all the principal approaches and identifying this building as a gateway building. So this is Wellington Road, and then we've looked at the cumulative development that could happen. So these are all white card views as you approach the site down Wellington Road, then with new development coming forward, the building as you're coming over the dual carriageway, and then those buildings that are currently consented that will happen around our site, and then looking from the other direction. So these approach views on the dual carriageway were quite important to us. Here you can see the cumulative development that starts to shield our building. And then we're very mindful of the approach from the west, that our building didn't appear overly wide because it's quite a long, slender building. And I think you can see here on these approach views, whilst it's got its widest side to this approach, these sweeping curves take you around the site and into the approach into the city. So these were our sort of key analysis views. I will flick through these because we've got, after this, these are the TVIA verified views that we've carried out. So we've agreed these with Tim and his team. So I've got existing, then proposed, and then with cumulative. So I don't know if anyone can spot the building appearing there, just behind those buildings in the background. So this is from Park Square East. And then some of the cumulative work. Now, our model is missing some of the new cumulative schemes that are around us, but I don't think it makes any difference to the impact that we see on these views. So our view outside the Bank of England Park Place, building appearing cumulative. Can't work out where it is on there. There we go. Some signage just behind in front center screen. So it's not a building that's significantly rising above its context. Whilst it's a tall building, it's not affecting the character of some of these important views. And obviously, it's a marker for arrival into the city centre. It's an interesting shot, this, but the context there is currently low. When the new development comes in, then you start to see the scale looking up and down Wellington Street. So you just see the longer range views. The building is just popping above those other buildings in the background. Now, obviously, it's going to be most visible from those open aspect approaches from the west and on that route into the city, but equally we want it to form that arrival as you come into the city centre. So you're getting a bit of a taster, obviously, of the architectural styling before we've got to that. But our approach to that design was that we're looking obviously at a contemporary design building, high quality, robust materials. We wanted materials that are relevant to the historic nature of Leeds. And we think a high quality brick building with a twist, with a brick blend, with really nice carved out open window openings is going to create something really exciting and dynamic. So we've got what you can see on these views, obviously the one from Westgate and the one looking directly from Wellington Street, those active ground floor levels, you see the cut through the building, this dynamic form of the building, which sort of addresses the routes around the site, and then stepping the building as well. So we have this lower element onto Wellington Street, and then the building rises behind. We've taken 2-story lifts of windows, so the apparent scale of the building every 2 stories reads more as 1. So whilst it's a taller building, that apparent scale is reduced. And then this is obviously the view if you were, if you decided to jump out of your car, you've got a flat tire and stand on the dual carriageway and look back, you see this building, this exciting dynamic building wrapping around. View at eye level, and this is the area we're hoping is going to be improved with new cycle network. We can get this connection through the building and into the site beyond down Skinner Street. Materials wise, I've mentioned brickwork, very high quality. We can do amazing things with bricks these days, deep window reveals, and we are looking at a high quality metallic panel for window opening. So briefly on the mix, I was looking at the timer, which I don't know if it got to 10 and started again.
No.
I think it did a glitch halfway through, so I don't know where I'm up to. It's a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. As I said, we're fully compliant with space standards, and we meet the accessible housing standards within your policy for Part M4, 1, 2 and 3. We are 10% 3-bed, 56% 2-bed, so we're predominantly the upper end of the larger units. 400 units, we're 70% rather cycle provision. We don't have any car spaces because of the accessibility of the site. And I think this is my last bit of slide, and I'm happy to come back, but this shows the landscape strategy. So we've looked at a landscape strategy around our site to the perimeter boundaries, to the back of footpaths.
10 minutes, Chair.
Thank you. And then we've looked at potential to take that to the edges of the footpaths, and we're aware that the route around Westgate may be closed off. So we're looking at some really exciting landscape design that creates really permeable routes, and how that can be extended to create a really green edge to this building. So your arrival is not just the building, it's the landscaping space that people are going to move through. I'll finish on this. Like I mentioned, we've been through 2 wind tunnel tests. It's compliant. We've had the sustainability credentials looked at, and we meet your targets. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Open it up to members for questions. Councillor Groom, please.
Thank you for that presentation. I've got 2 questions. One is, I think on slide 35, can you help me, Daljit? Is that where we were standing this morning? On the ground level there in the centre of the picture. Is that where we were?
I am going to print it here. Slide 35.
It's at slide 35. Yes. No, slightly different. Anyway, the question is the area that's currently had cars parked in it, and on the outside of the red line surrounding the building. We did feel when we looked at it, because the site affords very little opportunity for green space, that it was pretty important that you worked with ourselves and Highways on greening that bit up a little bit. And I think you alluded to that in the presentation. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how that is going to work, and how you're going to take that forward with Highways, and what sort of ideas you had in mind? Because with the cars parked there, we felt that was superfluous, that should be a green amenity space, really.
completely agree, Councillor Groom. We've been working with your highways officers, with your region officers about Westgate in particular, and that there's a real opportunity here to really enhance that part of the city as you come in. It's quite a barren space, it's quite a hard space, it's not overly pedestrian friendly. We've obviously got the intentions with the council as part of the cycle superhighway network as well. So I think there's some real opportunities. Now, we've shown kind of a potential super idea on here, which I know Christian's just skimming through to get to quite quickly, hopefully. It's at the end, our landscaping proposals. But yeah, we've tabled this with your highways officers, your landscape officers and your regen team. And we think this is something that could be really exciting in terms of that pedestrian arrival point. So it's beyond that, yeah, this one here. So all of a sudden, we've got the dedicated cycle network linking in and around the site. We've got enhanced public realm and we've got enhanced pedestrian routes as well, in addition to obviously the route that Christian's created through the building as well. So I agree with you on that.
Can I just ask who would maintain that? With it being outside the red boundary?
It depends whether it would be stocked up as highway. There'd be various mechanisms that it could be deemed to still be highway and be maintained by ourselves, or it could be stocked up and maintained by the developer, but that could be by, there'll be some kind of legal mechanism or license to do that.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because that suggests something more elaborate than highways would normally provide. And maybe it needs more specialist skills to maintain it, more like parks and countryside, even with, you're creating there quite a green amenity space, more like a park. The second question I had is, could you just clarify for me what's happening at ground floor level, please?
I haven't got a plan up there at the minute, but at ground amenity is at ground at first, which addresses the Wellington Road Street. Oh, brilliant, thank you. So let's go back one. Can we go back one slide? So, yeah. Oh. Sorry. So the at ground floor, we've got this perimeter, the green space around the perimeter, which you can see on here, and then if you did nothing and we just improve the footpaths around without any green space, we get the sort of buff space wrapping around the building. The principal entrance for amenity is on that junction of Cropper Gate, where the road sweeps around from Westgate. So that we've got our steps in there. There's a level change across the site of about a metre. You come in at that corner point, which is sort of the direct connection back into the city centre for pedestrians. And then that red space is amenity area. I describe areas of quantums of space in terms of comparisons with numbers of costas, because we all get how big a costa is. So this amenity space is something like 2.5 costas in overall area. So it's quite a big area over 2 levels. So you get this animated corner greeting you from Westgate all the way around on Wellington Street. What we then have is, if you go to the far end, opposite Ebor Court, there's another entrance into the scheme with another entrance hall. But we're assuming that most residents, when they're going to go in and pick up anything from the concierge or anything, will use the red area. But if you want to just go to your apartment and you're at that end of the building, you go through the other entrance that's adjacent to Ebor Court. Then in between, we need our other facilities. We have commercial sprinkler tanks, we have mist tanks for sprinklers, we have bins. What I didn't touch on, we have substations. But what I didn't touch on is the floor level has been set at a level that's resilient to any flood, and we can't put any amenity space that's needed for emergency operations such as sprinklers or lifts or entrances or anything like that below that level. So that's why they need to be at the ground floor.
And at the bottom of the building, it looks to me as if that's large scale glazing. Is that all the way around?
That wraps all the way around the red area, and then we will look to maximise any opportunities for glazing where we can. Obviously, the things like sprinkler tank rooms and things, you don't want glazing looking in, but we're going to break. The building is broken up at those levels to take the architectural design down to ground.
Thank you.
Councillor Latti, please. No. Any more questions from members? No, we can go on to comment. Can I ask why there's no disabled parking on it? I understand no vehicle parking. It's very much very central, but to have no disabled parking seems to me, something that should be further considered by you.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. It's a zero car parking scheme. So obviously we're all aware of climate emergency, sustainable location, and the kind of the encouragement to get people out of use of the private motor vehicle. That's not to say that we're not supporting the council in delivery of disabled parking in the vicinity of the site, and that's a conversation that's ongoing with highways and our highways consultants at the moment.
I think we'd like to see a bit more of that. I mean, clearly there will be disabled people living in this building, and connectivity is a problem. It's, they will need a car to get about, and it's something that you need to reconsider, I think, before it comes back to us.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. I think also we've been in close dialogue with the landowner next door, Claren, as well. Obviously, they've got some plans in terms of what they can do with their sites and their buildings. So I think actually it's a piece of the jigsaw, this site, obviously which then follows on from the former international pool development as well. So it's a real changing and emerging part of the west end of the city centre, I think I would call it. So there are definitely opportunities to look at how we can deliver that.
We move on to comments then from members. Do you want to make that as a comment then, Liz? I'll put you on.
Well, it's different. I think it will grow on one once you get used to it, but it certainly is a statement piece. On one of the slides, I probably should have pointed this out at questions. At the top of the building, there's quite a blank wall where there's no fenestration. Bit round the corner. If you've got a slide with a view from the other side, from Wellington Street, so there. I think that looks a bit odd. Perhaps you'd like to explain.
I think that side, I need to double check, it's got a, that view is slightly out of date. There are windows on there now. That is the edge of an apartment on the upper floor. So we have some windows wrapping along there. Previously, it was a corridor that went between two apartments. So apologies, there should be some windows on that view. So that will be broken up.
Sorry, this really is a question. On the left-hand side, there's a bit more blank wall. Is that going to be a fenestration all the way down?
Do you mean on the lowest, the image to the right?
Sorry, the slide to the left,
Sorry.
going down towards the canopy. There's quite a bit of blank wall there. Yet from the top of the building, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, the building has, I'll call it 3 typical floors. So broadly ground to 10, where we have the cut through, which is that route that will pass underneath the building, has an arrangement of apartments on it. That we then have the middle section and then the top section. That middle section has a corner window. I need to check whether there's an opportunity to add an additional window in there, but we couldn't run the line of windows above down there. We have a fairly substantial column because that cantilevers out over the corner with that canopy. So I think we can get some windows in there, but it won't be we won't continue the floor plate the wide window from above. I would just add that I think brickwork's a lovely material, and some wider areas of brickwork are not a problem. and we're looking at doing, like I said, a really interesting brick blend. So we want to get something that's got some reference to the history of Leeds in terms of its colour and texture. But I don't know if you've seen all these brick blends where we can match various bricks to provide sort of quite a textured finish. So I'd quite like to see some panels of brickwork.
Thank you, Tim. And when it comes back, I think we'd like to see some samples. Obviously, have you got some, Tom?
Sorry, I think there was a request about a week ago for some samples, and we're spent. You know, this building's predominantly brickwork, so we need to get that brickwork right. I've bought a brick blend with me, which isn't the brick that I'm proposing to use, but I've also bought, where we have the large window openings, we've got a double window and then a panel next to it. We're looking to put a polished metal vent panel in there, which is quite reflective. And we're looking sort of quite an earthy anodized colour. So you get quite a nice contrast against the brick. So that's what I bought with me. That's all I have at the minute to show you, which I'm happy. It's over there. I can go and get it.
Can it be passed around, or do members wish to walk up and have a look?
Of course you can, yeah. The brick panel is quite heavy.
Okay. Can I thank you for that, Tim, but can we, excuse me, Tim, thank you for that, but can we come back to one meeting?
His name's Christian.
Christian, sorry. Sorry, Christian. And I've got Councillor Walshaw next.
Thanks, Chair. See, nothing quite like the excitement of show and tell props at a plans panel too. I'm glad everyone's enjoyed Brick School. Yeah, Chair, I really rather like this building. I think it's rather bold. The site's a really important one to the city. I think there's a lot here to commend, especially when there's a lot of attention to detail as well. So I think this is a pretty positive pre-app, really. I like the access way through. That's a nice touch. the shape, the structure, how it aligns, the various elevations are provided, give me a lot of trust and confidence this is going to be a good proposal when it comes to fruition. And no parking spaces is bold, but I think it is a really sustainable location. If you're going to go no parking spaces, this is a place to try it, certainly. So yeah, this is really positive, provided the surface boundary treatments can be got right, the cycle provision, that kind of thing, all that detail that's to come, if that could be got right, I think it could be really positive, Chair. So yeah, happy to be very positive about this one.
Thank you, Neil. Moving on. Sorry, I've lost my bit. It's Councillor Garthwaite, please.
Yes, I like this development. I think there needs to be something on that site, and this looks good to me. I think that looking at the expanses of brickwork, I'm also thinking about the experience of the people who are living inside, not just how it looks from the outside, but I take your point. I like the fact you've gone into safety and security quite a lot, and the biodiversity is probably about as good as you can get in such a harsh environment surrounded by roads, but that's not your fault. And I think that it would be nice to see a bit more about diversity and green walls and green roofs and so on when it comes to full panel. But on the whole, yes, it's okay.
Councillor Latty, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm rather sorry I won't be here to see this one go through, because I'm sure it will go through. Not totally literally there. No, I do like this, and I do hope that you'll resist any temptation there might be to sort of do what some councillors ask and put more windows in. You know, if you get total symmetry, you can kill a design totally. So resist that. I think you've got a nice building here. I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned at all, and I can't recall from your views of what you can see and where you can see from, but the rotunda building we've got down by the canal makes you think about that, but it also shows you how much better can be done than was done with that building. So jolly good. I hope it goes the full distance.
You have another meeting, Graham. We'll. Well, you can always come as a member of the public and sit in on it, can't you? Paul, I've got you next.
Well, Councillor Watt has stolen my first comment, which was around, do we want the windows to run all the way down, or does that break? I know you're yes, but I was wondering what the rest of the panel thought. To run it all the way down, my view is that we do want some open brickwork, and the symmetry is not always what we want. But I was actually going to ask the developer when I looked at the bricks, Chair, but you brought me back just to the point I was going to ask. Does the shiny brick, putting that in randomly, does that give it a shimmering effect? Because the photographs that we see does make it look as if it's shimmering. Is that your intention of it? And does putting a shiny brick in randomly give that effect to the eye? Because obviously you're not going to put that in every brick, or is that part of the blend that you're getting to?
You only put the glazed brick in, obviously, in a random pattern. The effect is more of one that you see from a distance, that you just don't have this constant blend of one colour. So you get more texture to it. I can get some photos of the project we've completed with a similar sort of blend with a black brick in it. When you say shimmering, I'm not fully clear. Obviously, the bricks won't be shimmering. There'll only be one gloss brick in, let's say, every 50.
I think that a lot of the brick effect is very matte, isn't it? That we see.
Yeah.
And that looked on the pictures as if it was going to be a more smoother, shinier type of texture, which I like. And that was my comment. Is it going to be like that? Does the gloss brick every so often give that to the eye over a distance?
I think it does, but it won't make the whole thing clearly look glossy. And I mean, I'm a fan. I'm not a fan of smooth bricks personally, but because I think they give a very monochromatic colour to to brickwork. I like to see, I like to see the texture. And that's what I think we can generate. But the brick choice will clearly come down, I'm assuming, to a planning condition that we present, and we'll present full panels.
Besides that, Chair, I like it, and as being one of the people that comes in from the west of the city, we're the ones who are going to see it as a gateway building. And as sometimes I come into from the south of the city, and Bridgewater Place is the gateway building, I assume you are trying to replicate that view as you come in from the west. So that's. But not the building, but the statement. The other thing is with the disabled parking, I think the developer did say he was working with the council. He can only work with the council. I didn't know whether the highways officer wanted to comment on the disabled parking as to whether you thought that was achievable, because I think we do need some disabled parking. I'm happy with Councillor Walsh saying no parking because it's city centre location. I'm happy with that. But I think we do have to. We get criticised. A lot of criticism I get from my residents generally is there's not enough disabled parking in the city. It's always full. And I think that for disabled residents is going to be a big thing if there isn't sufficient. So I just wonder whether she had a comment or not.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, there's a difference between on-street disabled parking that visitors into the city would use and residential disabled parking. We wouldn't usually have on-street disabled parking for residential use. But we do think there may be an opportunity to work with the developer to identify some space within, because we're going to take out the sort of the road running around the building. We potentially have some space we might be able to identify that we could fit in some disabled parking to serve the development, or as the developer said, they're liaising with the next door development about the options there as well. So I'm hopeful that there is there's an opportunity we can provide some. Just also to add that in our draft transport SPD, which is out for pre-adoption consultation, we are requiring in their policy disabled parking for car-free developments, where there's no other general parking, and that is a change from the previous policy.
Any more comments from members? Kaylee, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think I agree mostly with what everyone said so far, but I'd like to see a bit more regard given to how residents will get to green space on foot. So when it comes back, just have a think about where all the green space is and what that journey would be, I suppose, and whether any of those routes need any improvement. Thank you.
Well, I just want to echo what people have said about the size and form of the building. I very much welcome it, and I think it's a very inventive use of the space that you had available, and I think the building echoes the shape of the land very well. And I think it's got all the makings of being a landmark. I think it's just a question now of getting the detail right. And we'll look forward to the material samples and more detail about the green space around it. But I welcome it. I think it's an attractive building.
Thank you. Thank you for all that. Just my comments really is the road. And I know it's not in the red line, but I'm looking at highways here. And the slide you showed towards the end, which is not part of it at the moment, looked very attractive and indeed provided a lot more green space and a lot more interest, just as Councillor Brooke has indicated and needed. So I'd hope somehow or other that highways and yourself can come together and produce something like that. I understand that it's not in your control, but it's a sterile road that goes nowhere, and it seems to be all it is tarmac and parking, which you've gone and made a very convincing case that we don't need parking in this area. We're very close to all the facilities in town. Well, I'm sure we don't need a line of 10 or 12 cars that I don't know who it belongs to. It must be highways, but it'd be much better if we had some type of landscaping. So I'd like that to be considered by highways and the applicants. Okay, and with that, can we go on to our questions in page 115, 710. And the first question is, do members support the proposed scale and form of the development? That's a general yes. Next question, do members consider that the emerging approach to landscaping and public realm is acceptable? Well, I think we could do better on that, you know, with cooperation with highways, but in general, yes, it's a limited small site. Are members agreeing? Any opinions? Okay, and do members support the approach to a car-free development subject to no adverse impact on highways being demonstrated? I think that sums it up. And it isn't part of the questions, but clearly there is an issue about housing mix. It's been raised before here. Are members happy with the proposed housing mix? Kaylee?
I would always like to see more 3 beds, but I mean, you know, if we could get up to 20%, I'd be delighted.
Proposing 10% there. So this is your opportunity to say, we'd like to see more 3 beds if possible, okay? And before it comes back to us. You can, Tom, yes.
Thank you. Totally appreciate the position. I think I was here at the January plans panel meeting. I always refer to it as the Free Trade Hall event. If you get the music reference over in Manchester, when certain people said that they were there, but when policy moved on, and rightly so, I think, in our view. And so the client is keen and committed to delivering 10% on here, and we will obviously, of course, look at it. We are continuing to work on the scheme and evolve on that as well. I think from our perspective as well, we probably, I think it was a comment you made, Councillor Brooks, at the last plans panel meeting, that there are some sites in the city that could deliver more 3-bed housing, given proximity to green space, the canal, the towpath, but also the local primary schools that are in the area as well, and the emerging schools that are coming forward. So, yeah, completely live to it. We'll have to do a housing market needs assessment anyway. I think Tim will be asking me for that report to accompany the application. But I think from our point of view, we feel that 10% is kind of probably the right amount in this location, given where it is, in the city centre, close to the station. But I think ultimately we'll continue to kind of evolve the scheme. We'll look at it and we'll come back with justification for where we end up to, but with our minimum position is 10%, which is a good place to be from where I think a few schemes were a couple of months ago.
Thank you for that response, Tom. And can I say you've done an excellent job of designing the building. We've looked, some of us today walked around there, we can see why you've come to that shape. It's very imaginative and it fits in beautiful. It is a building, if it's completed as on plans, it's something that Leeds can and should be proud of. So let's hope it does develop and come out to look even better than it does on paper. But thank you for that. And can I wish you good afternoon? Shall we crack on? Well, I don't think we need a break, do we? We've just got one more pre-app. Matthew, thanks, Tim. Is Matthew about?
He's not here, so I think
You're gonna.
We'll
get him in.
The agents to present it.
Okay. Okay. I often like. Hey, members, we're waiting for the applicants and the clients to come, so they're on the way. So it seems like we will. Oh, they're here, are they? No.
They're short.
Okay, so a break might be advisable. Please have a cup of tea.
Some more water, Chair.
Yes, please. Thank you. You're very kind.
No, happy to serve people.
We'll wait. We're live. Okay, moving on then. Agenda item number 9. Pre-app. I will ask the developers to introduce in a minute, but in the meantime, a few words from Dalgid.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it brief. The applicant or developer and their team will take you through the details very shortly. I just want to remind members that the former Yorkshire Post site has had previous planning permission, and that was part implemented. That was for a mixed-use scheme of residential and office development. And for those members that were on site, they'll have noticed that the residential building has been delivered, but the office buildings have not. And since that consent was granted, the office approvals have now fallen away. The site has now been acquired by the current developers who have come forward with a residential scheme. So it's a different use, but it's something that we're supportive of as officers. And I think from the previous presentation and from the presentations on the former international pool site, this area is changing. So it's within that context I would like you to consider the proposals that are about to be presented to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dalgid. Can I wish you all good afternoon? And we've seen each other many times. You will know that you have up to 10 minutes to present, but I often let you have a few minutes extra if it's worth listening to, and I'm sure it will be. So when you're ready, please start your presentation. And if you'd introduce speakers one at a time when they come on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. My name is Tim Waring, Quad. We're the planning advisors to Urban Night, and as you may recollect, I've been the planning advisor on this site for quite a few years now. Today, I'm going to pass over to Sue from DLA, who's going to talk you through the scheme. I'm here to answer questions on planning aspects. Sue can answer schemes on architecture and design. And we've got Terry Shaw as well from the developers, who's here to answer any operator related questions. So I'll pass straight over to Sue and she'll talk you through the proposals.
Thank you, members. So we'll come on to the first slide. The site is a key gateway site on the approach to the city centre from the Kirksall Road. The site will provide the final piece of the jigsaw in terms of the new Leeds West End. Since its inception, the site, we've looked at maximising the placemaking and public realm. We have approximately 2/3 of the site given over to public realm. The scheme is operator-led and deliverable. Subject to a positive outcome of the planning process, we'd like to be on site in early 2023. The scheme will meet the differing housing needs of Leeds. It's designed to Leeds standards in terms of the draft co-living, in terms of the sustainability policies, but also in terms of the nationally described space standards. As a practice, we're committed to REBA 2030 climate challenge. So sustainability has been embodied since the start of the project. And a key part to us is making sure the scheme is designed for future adaptability to respond to changing needs. So if we come on to the next slide, members will be more than familiar with the site. So here we just give you an aerial view to set the scheme in context. On the next slide, we indicate the evolving context. Everything in blue in principle is approved or under construction. The 3 blocks in yellow on the Wellington Place site are the outline consent. And I don't think I need to mention the scheme to our left, which came before us today. On the next slide, we set our proposed scheme in context. The building front to the left, which fronts onto Wellington Street, is Building A, which is 40 stories and designed as purpose-built student accommodation. In the middle, we have Building B, which is 30 stories and designed as purpose-built student accommodation. And the building fronting the river is Building C, which is 25 stories and designed as build to rent. We've been working with planning officers and design officers for over 6 months. We show on screen here just some of the townscape analysis we've undertaken to assess the tall buildings in relation to the wider context of Leeds. Some of these views are referenced within members' panel report. We then show on the next slide just one example of the assessment that we've undertaken on all of those historic views. This obviously covers the existing context, our scheme within that existing context on the bottom left, and then our scheme in the cumulative, the evolving context on the bottom right. So on the next slide, we start to introduce the master plan. As I said earlier, the site, we are looking at approximately 2/3 of the site given over to high quality public realm. At the heart of the scheme, we look to complete the public square, which sits between the headline building and building A. That public square then links through to the river park and the riverside walk. We're proposing to integrate active play within both of those spaces for both adults and children in terms of urban wellness. In the bottom left-hand corner, we're looking to introduce a microforest, which I'll come on to later. And then fronting onto Wellington Bridge Street, we've got 2 public art structures. One of those public art structures will be the Reinvented Yorkshire Post Tower. The idea of that structure is it helps deal with the microclimate. We're on the southwesterly winds, but also allows the ability for us to relocate the temperature and clock gauge from the existing tower, which is seen by many as a city icon for Leeds. And then just on the corner on Wellington Street and Wellington Bridge Street, we've introduced biophilic structures, which I'll come on to later. Those biophilic structures are designed to deal with microclimate, but also have a reference to nature. So then we look at the ground level plan. We're illustrating here, and the colours are slightly gone on the main screen, so I apologise. It is supposed to be blue, but it's coming through slightly bluey green on the main screen. Anything in blue is active frontage. We're ensuring that any of the key pedestrian routes through the site have natural surveillance. Obviously, a key part of any site is safety. There are always other areas such as back of house in terms of refuse and cycles and plant, but we're ensuring that we have natural surveillance over those key routes and the riverside. Then onto the design narrative. A key driver for our scheme has been the site history. Originally a woolen mill and latterly a paper mill, as in the terms of the Yorkshire Post. We illustrate a few precedent images of the manufacturing process on screen. How the printing presses had the folds and weaves we're looking to bring through in the facade and both in the public realm. We've also been keen since the start of the project that the material palette responds to Leeds in terms of the red terracotta, which I'll come on to on the next slide. In the top left, we're illustrating a colour palette. There's some examples for members here in terms of materials to look at. We're looking at 3 tones in a precast panel. On the right, we start to illustrate, we've been working hard with a precast supplier, and what we're showing members today, we wanted to make sure was technically deliverable. Obviously, achieving a high quality facade that we can deliver over the overall towers. So then zooming back out at the aerial view, we start to set the scheme within the Leeds context. You can see how the colour palette relates to the wider Leeds. On screen now, we just have some concept elevations. They are quite early stage, but we've been working with officers on the proportion of the towers. The scheme is designed as a family of units, and they have a subtle reference in terms of colour to one another. So this illustrates to members just where we are in terms of that evolving design. So then we zoom back into the detail on those facades. As I say, we're looking to bring through that fold and weave within the facade. The images on the left-hand side give an idea of the colour tone and detail on Building A, Building B in the middle, and Building C in the bottom left. And then on the right of the screen for members, we've just illustrated how that appears in terms of a 4-bay height. We have integrated a perforated panel within that facade. We're designing the scheme so that people have the ability to open windows. Obviously, as part of the process, we will be addressing acoustics and air quality, but people may still choose to open the windows for fresh air. So then we zoom back out and look at a very initial CGI of how the middle tower, Building B, will feel. And it shows members some of that detail against that initial CGI view. So then looking at low level, we've talked about the public square and the setting and bringing the landscape back to a human scale, which is a key part of any urban development site, and also the potential for each building to have that natural surveillance. So we step back out to the aerial view before then we go into connectivity, just to remind members. So in terms of connectivity, the scheme will deliver a major piece of infrastructure in terms of the Riverside Walk. At the moment, it's not possible to connect under the bridge to our east, but it facilitates the connection back to Kirksall Road and then through, once we've broken through, to the MEPC site as that site comes forward. We then look at the site itself. Building A and B have zero car parking. We have drop-off laybys to deal with servicing and taxis, and Building C has limited car parking at ground level. The public realm has been designed around enhanced connectivity, both pedestrian and cycle. So then getting a feel of the look and feel of that public realm. We're proposing to integrate lawned areas. I've just walked through Park Square today, and it's the ability for people to informally sit out in and enjoy the sunshine. We've got some images in the top right that indicate the active play in terms of a trim trail for adults and children's play equipment. In the middle of the screen, there is just an example of a biophilic structure in terms of how it gets that reference to nature. A key part of the overall design has always been that reference to the history. We're looking to integrate some typography within the public realm that may pick up on some major public events that perhaps the Yorkshire Post have reported upon through history. So then on the next slide, these are very preliminary views of the landscape, just to give members an idea of how the River Park, which is in the top image, and how the Riverside Walk, which is in the bottom image to the left, will feel. We've knocked the buildings back to white because it is a conceptual model, but we were keen to give an idea to members of how those public spaces were evolving. Oops. It seems to have stopped. Next slide, please. Yes. So when we talk about the integration of play, we indicate on this slide the area between Building C and the headline in the middle of the slide is where the children's play equipment will be integrated. And then in the bottom left, fronting onto the Riverside Walk, is the trim trail. Both areas are south facing to take advantage of the sunlight and also have natural surveillance. Next slide, please.
So it's 10 minutes, Chair.
I am on the last slide. So we're on the microforest. The microforest that's located in the southwest corner of the site is designed to establish over a 20-year period. The microforest can be established in an area as small as 100 metres squared. They have the benefit of enhanced biodiversity, providing increased oxygen levels within an urban environment, carbon sequestering benefit. Obviously, we're right next to the ring road in terms of stormwater management, obviously as in terms of SUDS, improved acoustics, again, because we're fronting onto the ring road, and helping mitigate the urban heat island. And we're committed to delivering the microforest. Next slide, please. So if members have any questions, hopefully that whistle stopped or gave you a good background. Please just let us know.
Thank you. So I certainly didn't want to stop you because I wanted to hear more about the microforest, and I'm sure you'll have questions on that. Can we invite questions from members? Neil.
Tell me more about your microforest.
The microforest is designed to bring in a minimum of 20 different tree species. The consultant that we're working with will look at locally what actually thrives well in terms of native species. It's a managed process over the first 3 years. Over the first 3 years, it's designed to ensure that they thrive and start to take place. After that, it is zero maintenance. The microforest will bring in air quality benefits, oxygen levels, and because it's in the southwest corner, we've obviously got the links in terms of biodiversity to the Riverside Walk.
on the microforest if Liz is not going to pick it up.
Sure, she will be.
I mean, it's in the most polluting part of the site. There, top of that slip road is where there is the most congestion from people who don't know which lane to be in. So, how much carbon will it take up? And secondly, you say it's zero management after 3 years. We had a bit of a conversation yesterday in full council about things like the dark woods, where this gets out of hand and hasn't been maintained in certain areas of the city. So, is it the intention to just leave it to its own devices? And we do chop a lot of vegetation down on the canal bank to remove any antisocial behaviour. So do you feel that the natural surveillance will be sufficient?
I'll come on to the carbon saving first. Now, because I can't quite go from memory, I've got them in front of me. The figures the consultant's given us, obviously the full establishment of the microforest is over a 20-year period. But over 10 years, we'll have, based on a 400 metre squared, 350 to 400 metre squared area of microforest, which we're proposing on our site, the nitrogen dioxide saving is 31.8 kilograms. When we come into the particulate matter in terms of air quality, there's a 2.5 kilogram saving. The microforest also, because of the different species of tree, obviously plays to enhancement in terms of insects. So it actually creates a home for over 500 different insects within that woodland, but also animals as well. In terms of the structure of the microforest itself, the consultant has advised us, because forests are designed, forests happen, they can be managed, but they can happen naturally. The idea is that there's a shrub layer at the low level, there's a sub-tree layer, because it's all about different canopy heights to ensure that they do thrive and that they will work together. There's the tree layer and then there's a canopy layer. So if we went back to the slide on the microforest, there's a diagram on that slide, which hopefully might help members. There we go. In the middle at the bottom, there's a diagram that indicates the strategy in terms of those different species of tree. Again, this is there are examples of the microforest in the UK. In the bottom left, you will see an example of a microforest that's been planted in London. And I think a key part of this is Leeds could have this as an exemplar in terms of what others should be doing in urban environments. We're engaged with a consultant about the detail, because we've not directly implemented a microforest before, but we're committed to actually taking this idea forward, and we can see a lot of benefit. So the test will be, they have tested the programme in terms of zero maintenance. The test will be our situation. But what we've been told by the consultants is they will look at shrubs and trees within a certain radius of the site and see what thrives well and what works to establish the planting plan for our site.
Could I, sorry, just to add to that point, I think in planning terms, we're very happy to commit to this through some form of planning obligation, and then whatever management and maintenance regime we feel and your own ecologist and arboriculturalist feel is appropriate. So we'll work with your team to do that and then secure it through the legal obligation and to be delivered as part of the scheme.
I'll let the expert come in a second. A couple of questions. Where in London is that? And I'll take a look. And secondly, what stops the lower species being crowded out by the canopies of the higher stuff? Because in a natural forest, that's what would happen. And what excavations are you going to have to do to establish it? Because you've got no soil there because it was the previous printworks. And what you need to do is get a good establishment for particular taller species to expand their roots and get their water. And we have a lot of street trees, particularly in the city, that don't have the right excavations and don't thrive particularly well. I think Liz would agree.
Well, the example in the bottom left is the Forest for Change as part of the London Design Biennial. We can obviously provide members with a specific location if you did want to go and view it. I mean, we'd love to visit it. We haven't yet, but we'd love to see how it's actually worked. In terms of the soil, yes, they do import. There's a specific growing medium. And I have to say, this is not my specialist area. We can give members more detail. But they do import a specific growing medium that actually gives the trees more nutrients to actually establish the quick growth of the forest, rather than just planting them in substandard soil, because it's all about the subsoil that's feeding those trees. And I do have a list of tree species as an example. I'm not proposing, I'm more than happy to share them with Councillor Nash if you'd like to have a look through them, because they've given a tree species per canopy layer as well.
David has said that it's Somerset House in London. If you, okay. Can I, with your permission, bring Liz in here? It's about trees, and then Paul's more or less introduced it, and then I'll come back to the list I've got in front of me. Okay, Liz.
Right. Well, it's a very nice idea, but I can see problems there. Somerset House, I don't see any major roads running past it. And some tree species, as you know, are not tolerant to traffic pollution, oak especially. And the number of times I've seen applications for oak trees or for field maples, which will just not survive. Having said, and this site is immediately adjacent to, what do you call it? Well, not Wellington Place, the road that goes over the bridge and leads to the gyratory. I mean, that is very heavily trafficked. On the other hand, the plus side is that it's adjacent to the river, I presume, and therefore the water table should be reasonably high, even though it was an industrial site previously. So willows tend to do pretty well, the osier family. But I would like to see the list of trees. Yeah.
The example I've been given by the consultant is just an example as it stands, because they have actually got an oak and field maple, but it is an example. What they've told us, we actually met them on site last Monday, and that's where they would look at areas where existing trees are close to roads to see what does actually thrive. I'm relying on their expertise in this implementation, but obviously it is something that they wouldn't be promoting if they couldn't get the specific species to work. And the test is the microclimate locally, both traffic, water, urban environment, and they'll write a specific species of tree to suit our site around that. I'm quite happy to share this with Councillor Nash just as the example.
Thank you, Sue. Can I bring in Peter now, please?
Thanks, Chair. I forgot what my question was now. Oh, it was around the parking spaces that you've got first. So there's 16 spaces. So I'm happy with no spaces being available for the student one. I'm pretty happy with no spaces being available for any residents that don't need a space in the residential apartment. I'm assuming then in some way that they're going to be a mix of maybe visitor or disabled parking, and I was just wondering how they would be managed, because the only people that will need cars are those that may need them due to a disability or visitors to the site. The other question, I'm guessing Kaylee might come into this as well. We've only got, it's good to see more than 50% 2-bed, because that gives us a good housing mix. But I think the numbers on the 3-bed at 7% are lower than we'd like to see in this kind of area. We are a bit closer to the city, but really our target is a minimum of 20%. So we're happy to give some leeway, but not quite that much in all. The last point I have, I see that on building A, you've got mostly clusters, but building B, there's quite a large number of studio apartments. I'm always a bit worried about studio apartments and students living on their own in that environment, especially when they might be new to the city. So I just wondered around the explanation for that. I think we have a worry that that's a lot of people living on their own, not necessarily seeing people every day, and why we feel students might be preferring that than the clusters.
Peter?
Thank you, Councillor Cahill. I'll let Sue answer the latter 2 points. I think just on the car parking issue, the intention will be that this will be a managed building, so a managed build to rent scheme in much the same way as the headline building is managed by Granger. And it's fair to say, subject to today's pre-app views from yourselves, we have 3 very keen build to rent operators who wish to take the building, assuming that today goes well. So obviously not all 3 of them, one of them will take it. But they will manage the block in the same way as Granger do theirs. And Granger, as you may recollect, has got car parking provision, which is less than 1 per unit, which is fairly standard these days around the city, and obviously down to 0 parking. It will be managed. We'd expect your council to impose some form of management regime condition on the planning consent. And it will be primarily for either allocated to specific specific occupants and disabled. The disabled will hit your council standards for disabled provision. I'll pass over to Sue in relation to the unit sizes and the studio apartments in the student.
Thank you, Tim. I know I'm wondering about the benefit of YouTube at the moment, but I can pass this round to members. Hopefully everybody can see. On the question about flexibility, because we're more than aware of the look towards providing more 3 beds and attracting more families into the city, which is a key part of any design. Our part as architects is looking at designing in flexibility. Here, we just illustrate 2 of the nationally described space standards. On the left, we have a 2-bed, 4-person unit, which is a very similar size to a 3-bed, 4-person unit. So a 2-bed, 4-person unit under the nationally described standards is 70 square metres, and a 3-bed, 4-person is 74 square metres. We're looking at our units because it's a managed build to rent scheme. We're designing it so that there can be a partition introduced within the main master bedroom to actually create 2 single rooms, which allow the scheme to be adapted for families. Because this is a managed scheme, obviously they want to attract people to live in these spaces as well. So they can introduce additional work to actually provide for more families. And as members have said, at the moment, generally, I think the target is 10%, but there may be 30% of families living in Leeds in 30 or 40 years' time. We want this scheme to be adaptable, to respond to those needs. I'm happy to pass this board round if members would like to have a further look, but hopefully that starts to address the question about flexibility and accommodating those 3-bed units. So regarding studios, in terms of building A, we've got 65 studios in building A, and we've got 1,000 cluster beds. In building B, we've got 55 studios, and we've got 494 cluster beds. We are a cluster bed led scheme.
The report's wrong.
I think that's where I was just. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
As long as we can amend the report on what we agree, I'm perfectly happy with that.
Yeah, because we have got student amenity space to bring everybody together, more than aware of the whole part about health and well-being and making sure people don't feel isolated. So yes, on top. Okay.
Yeah, 2, please.
Yeah, thanks. So the point of 7.1.7 then is just the wrong way around in the report. So it should say 494 cluster beds and 55 studios, which is a pretty good percentage. I'm very happy with that. I guess that was really useful in terms of the 2 layouts, because obviously then you could add a new wall at any point and then let that out to a family with 2 children or 3 people sharing if they so wished. I guess the opposite being you could also remove that wall at any time. Am I guessing on this scheme that you've got 7% of them therefore there where that would be a permanent wall and we wouldn't be expecting you to go below that at any time and rent them as 2 beds, for instance? You'd always be renting them as 3 beds, but you would have the capability that if somebody that needed 3 bedrooms came in, you would be able to adapt that for them. Okay.
And again, I think that can be controlled through planning, that there will be a minimum of 7%, and then we'll be able to demonstrate the adaptability of the rest through the planning. And as a consequence of that, flex it to suit the adaptability required.
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting and innovative way to allow it through and to allow that growth. I guess that's just something for us to consider, that obviously we would want 10% to be in there. Now you would be able to gain that if the audience was there, but that does then depend, I guess, and this is a point for officers really, on how that's marketed, because you could with all the best intentions market that as 3 bedrooms, or with intentions different, you could market it as just 2-bedroom properties. And so that's something maybe to consider in some of the agreements of how that'd have to be marketed, and see whether it could be, we could ensure that option of a 3-bed was there for people that wanted to come through.
I bring Dalgid into that just to make a point.
I think the idea of adaptability going forward is actually very creative, very good idea. The only thing I would advise members is that we need the space from the start to be able to then ensure that if a 2-bed unit becomes a 3-bed unit, it still meets our space standards. Because the space standards is based on occupancy.
Okay. I think that's an important proviso. Peter?
Yeah, and they were. Yeah, so it's quite far. So they're, as far as I'm understanding it, the 2 beds will be built to the 3-bed space standard size within the particular scheme. And therefore, when we would normally be requesting that 10%, I'm quite happy personally, and I don't know what others think, to allow lower than that, as long as we know that within the marketing of the scheme, there will be that offer for 3 beds, because obviously the agent could go away and then market it purely as 2-bed apartments without then that flexibility being available.
For that, can I bring in Councillor Walsall now, please?
Thanks, Chair. Just as I was being handed the. There you go. Sorry. There you go, Councillor Brooks. Yeah, and Councillor Carlos covered some of the questions I wanted to ask. So, first, looking at the building B, so some reservations about the colour, but not the design. So when this comes for a full application, if there could be accurate samples, that'd be really helpful for members, I think. Oh, do you know, I was so taken by Councillor Garthwaite broke your model that I didn't notice. Well, I think we should be honest about these things. No, okay. So I will look at the samples. Thanks for that. Obviously, when it comes forward to a full application, we want to see a very strong story regarding carbon and renewables. It's really important to us as a city. You know, the local plan work we're doing at the moment, which is central to where we are as a city. Councillor Carlos already covered the mix and the flexibility. This perhaps be one you can't actually answer at the moment, but in terms of the purpose-built student accommodation elements, looking to the future, I represent Headingley and High Park Ward, you see, which is obviously ground zero for the student population, as does Councillor Garthwaite. And is the PBSA market going to try to reach to sort of 2nd and 3rd and final years at any point? Because I think that would be very important for our communities, because obviously we have a lot of student houses and in the main they are great, but we're trying to diversify our community. And there is a lot of purpose built going up in Leeds. There's already gone up and there are permissions, and then your very well thought through proposals there before us today, and we'll come through to a full application. What are your thoughts on reaching those other parts of the student population? Because that could really be quite a game changer for some communities around the city centre. And I think it'd be important to hear some views. If you can't answer now, that's fine, but some thoughts on that would be interesting to hear. Not strictly a planning condition, I appreciate, Chair, but I think it's an important philosophical question to ask. And that's me done, Chair. Thanks.
I think, Councillor Walsall, there is some evidence now that is emerging, which is demonstrating that years 2, 3, 4 at universities are now starting to look at PBSA rather than necessarily looking at HMOs. And the reason being is that this generation of students are all starting to feel that they all used to going on holiday with their parents to Malmaison or wherever it may be, and perhaps HMOs aren't the thing of the future. So there is evidence that is emerging, and I think that's what is driving to an extent the scale of PBSA in the city centre. It isn't about the growth in students necessarily. It's about that changing expectation and demand for the future. So yes, that is something that's happening now. Whether I've got any evidence that I can point to specifically, it's certainly qualitative at the moment, but we'll certainly bring it out if we can in the planning application. Yeah.
Please.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a bit of a stack of questions, actually. So in the presentation, you said that the windows are openable. I'm just wondering if that's a good idea right next to that busy main road. That's the first one. I know obviously you've got examples of the wind bafflers just over there, but I'm assuming that means that the wind studies you've done have shown that it's potentially at the very least uncomfortable, if not dangerous, like on the ground. So I was just going to ask a bit around that, I suppose. The clock and thermometer, what exactly will you be doing with it? Oh, and what's the difference between a microforest and a copse or a woods? Because it sounds like developer sort of daft speak to me when you could just say woods. Yeah, marketing speak, that's the one. Yes, agreed on the studios and 3 beds, and thank you for the explanation on that. I would just like to say though, it's not just about families, it's also about like people having the choice to be able to live in a group and share, and just be able to have that sort of flexibility, as well as like maybe over time you could then start a family if you choose to in that same flat. Yeah, so oh, affordability of the purpose-built student accommodation as well. Sorry, this is a lot, isn't it?
Councillor Brooks, as I mentioned at the beginning, I've been involved in the site since 2014, I think, when we first started planning on this, and as has Terry as well. And the wind issues affecting this site, given where it sits in the city, you know, it's the first part of the city centre that really is hit by the southwesterlies, and therefore it's a tricky site to deal with. But we have taken, as part of the design process, wind advice from the very start, because we know of the issues that affect this site. And as a consequence of that, the scheme has been designed, and I'll let Sue explain to an extent how the scheme has addressed the wind issues, both in terms of its design, but also in terms of the mitigation that we're proposing. And some of that work is mitigation, as you rightly point out, in order to create the right comfort levels and safety levels. But I'll pass over to Sue on that.
Thank you. So I'll start on the wind mitigation. The site is designed, as Tim said, we've been involved with the wind consultant literally since we first put pen to paper. The scheme is designed on an east-west axis. Obviously, the southwesterlies are the most dominant. So you can't stop the wind. You've got to work out how you actually move it through the site, or then deal with localized microclimate in terms of pedestrian comfort. So the orientation of the site has been a key driver in terms of the southwesterlies. We've also created a faceted tower on either end, because you can get what the wind consultant calls positive pressure on flat surfaces. The wind hits it, doesn't know where to go. So the faceted towers allow the wind to move around the towers and then release. So that deals with the design as a overall, but regarding pedestrian comfort, we've run the initial models, we've done CFD tests so far, and subject to the outcome of today, we're looking to move to a wind tunnel test. The CFD shows that we're achieving the comfort levels on site. We haven't got safety issues in terms of off-site. The wind mitigation features, we have a few through the site. I don't know whether the master plan can be brought back up, which may help members rather than just me talking at the moment. But obviously we've got the biophilic structures, which are on the junction of Wellington Street and Wellington Bridge Street, because that's funneling. Basically, that access road is funneling the wind down onto Wellington Street. So, and it does at the moment, if anybody's gone when it's windy. So actually bringing in these structures will help that comfort level, because then you're into where can you stand and sit within the site. So as I say, in the top left of the screen, we've identified where those biophilic structures sit. They're designed to vary in height between 3 and 7 meters, because that's how it deals with bringing the wind through. One flat height doesn't help the wind based on the CFD model. The two public art structures that we've got, one shown between A and B is the Reinvented Tower, and the one on the access road junction. They're basically funneling the southwesterlies at high levels through the site. And we have a few wind mitigation features distributed through the site. On the southeast corner of Block C, we've introduced pergola structures that help the downdraft. It's trying to make wind mitigation attractive within the public realm, because as Tim alluded to, it is a factor we have to deal with. We're the first site that, as we hit the city centre on the southwesterlies. I think obviously we can give members more detail around that once we've gone through as well the wind tunnel test, but everything we've undertaken so far shows the scheme works.
Hi, my name's Terry Shaw. I work for the developer. Tim and I have been involved with this scheme since the start of when the original Evening Post buildings were demolished, and we're responsible for the Granger building that has been built. And we were responsible also for then dealing with the wind consultants who were Bure Appold, and they've been engaged on this scheme that we're now looking at. Hence, we know the importance of wind and mitigating it, because it is, as Sue says, that it's the first site that wind hits as it's coming into the city. Predominantly, that's the wind direction they're coming. We've undertaken over 35 wind studies already since the start, just to make sure that we have no wind issues on site or off site. So it is something that we know we've got to do, not only for safety, but for comfort for pedestrians. And we've done a lot of work, and we will do further work before we submit for planning, just to prove that.
So shall I come in on the other points, if that's okay with members about wind? Yeah, okay. The reference to the openable windows. We're designing the facade to allow both openable windows and mechanical ventilation heat recovery. So if we have an acoustic issue and an air quality issue, the scheme can be fully supply and extract, and it's integrated. We're not going to end up with pepper potted vents on the facade. But even if there is an acoustic issue, people can choose to open the window. People are living in these spaces. So we've designed it so you can make a choice and open that window. But what we wanted to do, because of the towers, is make sure there was an integrated guarding. Because sometimes everybody has different body temperatures, don't they? And sometimes you just need the element of fresh air. So we're designing a facade that allows for a robust solution, but we're not relying on those opening windows if acoustics and air quality.
I think also, just in terms of the ensuring that we look to future-proof this, we're in a situation at the moment where we've got a very busy road. We'll probably have a very busy road in 10 years' time, but actually we'll be looking at electrification of vehicles. So we will have quieter vehicles. We'll also have zero emissions from those vehicles. And as a consequence of that, we need to look to the future rather than essentially close off the opportunity for people to open those windows when in the future it might be more attractive to do so than it is today. So it's all about adaptability and flexibility.
Just to add as well, we've already undertaken air quality assessments and noise assessments, so we understand the issues that we're dealing with on all of the elevations of the buildings. So with the Granger building that we've already completed, the windows are openable because we can for air and quality. On our building that we're about to do, we've got the option where it will be on part mechanical ventilation if that is what's needed due to air and noise. But at the same time, for comfort levels, we've all stayed in hotels like Premier Inns before, and you'll stay in a room where you can't open the window, but you'd like to. So we want to have the option that people can, and the facades that we're dealing with, that we've designed throughout, the architects have got this grille for safety as well. So everything looks the same, and we've got the ability to go both ways.
Thank you for that. Kaylee, is that okay?
I think that covered everything except for, oh yeah. What exactly are you going to be doing with it? And also, is a microforest something specific, or is it not? Just a wood.
I'm completely with you. Yeah. When the architects and marketing say, whatever it is, this forest, I look at it and go, in my world, it's a wood. So there's an existing wood on the corner of Wellington Bridge Street with the river. For ecology purposes, we want to retain that. It's well established. It's been there for the last 30, 40 years. It thrives. And what we're doing is extending that. And yeah, it's got the term it has. I don't understand why, but we will make it work with officers in landscaping and ecology, as well as by design, to make sure there are no undesirables going in that area. But the levels as well there on Wellington Bridge Street at the top where this wood will be are way higher than the river as well. So that's on the top of Wellington Bridge Street, where the site is, say, 3 meters higher at least than the rest of the site. So we've got no issues as well when people are worrying about having to cut down trees along the riverside.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with Terry here. I suppose consultants do give things names, but I think the key part here is you don't often get forests in urban environments to this degree. So there, normally you get more tailored landscapes in city centres. So that's why the name's been given as a microforest. But the key is dense tree planting in the same way. And I think on the last two, we had about the clock and the temperature gauge. So the Reinvented tower, we are looking to either relocate or recreate what you see on top of the Yorkshire Post Tower as it stands at the moment, because the key is just bringing that identity back to the site. People see it at a low level and they identify where they are in the city. So we want to maintain that as part of the evolving scheme design. And I think there was the point about sharers. And as you say, the example we've handed around today could equally be occupied by 3 different people in different bedrooms that are actually just groups and sharers. They don't have to be families. But again, the build to rent is a scheme that's managed, so they will respond to what people want, because they need to get people to want to live in those spaces. So if they are getting more sharers, then they'll install that partition wall and they'll make it lettable. So we're designing in that flexibility, but I agree, we need to have flexibility for all, don't we?
Just on the clock tower as well, the whole of the team live in Leeds. The developers live in Leeds. Even though it is a new company that owns this site, it is still the original developers from when we bought the Evening Post. It's just under a different company name that is now doing the different type of work, which is the student accommodation, this build to rent. But the architects from Leeds, the planning consultants from Leeds, developers from Leeds, we all know how iconic this tower is. We all want to keep it.
Sorry, is Councillor Latty now, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points. The tower you've just been referring to, I trust that's going to come back as part of the whole application. In the past, we've had some unpleasant experiences where these bits of public art, as it was described somewhere, come along afterwards and rather spoil what we have been rather proud of having accepted. So I hope it'll be part of the whole application. The other point is, and I suppose it's a bit unusual for me to worry about what goes on inside buildings, because generally speaking, I don't go that way. But last night, council finished a bit late, and it was a nice evening. And as I drove home, I go through a student area, and you couldn't move for the beggars. They were walking, cuddling, skateboarding, you name it, in the road, you know. And so we're here. We're going to have an awful lot of students. A very, very big building, full of students, and a not quite so big building full of people. So I should say, people who've moved beyond being students. Yeah, no, I did correct myself. I know I have some sensitive colleagues at that side. So on a night like last night, all these students aren't going to stay in their tower blocks. Are we happy that the space we've got, and I'm not being frivolous now, I'm quite serious about this, that the space we've got for people to mix, mingle, do the sort of things that they do, bearing in mind that what students do is slightly different from what some older people might want to do. Are we happy with what we've got on the ground there? Because to me, the bit that everybody's going to head towards is the riverbank. That's where you want to be, and that's where the fun is. That's where you can throw things in, you know, you can see things float past, etc. You can sit and look at it. And it's not a very big area for all these people. I know you were talking about earlier, about people enjoying the inside of their dwellings. Well, students, perhaps. Yeah. So, yeah, simple question. Are you happy with the space, the availability of places for people to relax within the site?
Yes. Sorry, rather flippant. but I think there are two issues, Councillor Latty, you raised there, and in terms of, I think, the compatibility of students with people who are, you know, not students. This will be a managed public realm area. There will be a management company that manages the entirety of it, and therefore, as a consequence of that, not only is that maintenance, but that is managing it. So that will be a managed space. As a consequence, antisocial behaviour, etc., will be managed in much the same way as anywhere else is purpose built, like MEPC scheme or alternatively Lisbon, the swimming pool site, which will all be a managed area. So we're very confident that they can live side by side in that managed environment. In terms of, is there enough open space, as Sue mentioned, 62%, 61% of the site is given over to public realm, and appreciate that the riverside will be a very popular space. But that riverside actually isn't just in front of our site, it's actually going to be seamlessly blended into the rest of the riverside, and that is going down into MEPC scheme. So the scheme itself will interact and will actually operate as part of a wider piece of city realm here, and it'll go down into the pocket park that Groundwork Trust are delivering down by the I call it Kevin Linfoot's place, but it's not anymore, but down just off Whitehall Riverside. So there's a whole area here that we think will be utilised by the residents here. So I think in answer to that, yes, and also there are roof terraces proposed within the scheme as well. So there'll be external areas, the build to rent area. I don't know if we've got the image, but that shows the roof terrace that sits on that southern. So yeah, perhaps those who don't want to mix with the students will be able to sit up on the roof terrace. In terms of your first point about the tower, I don't know if you recollect, but the tower itself, that's the last remaining piece of the Yorkshire Post building, and sitting behind that cladding is a fairly monstrous piece of concrete. It was dressed up on a temporary basis to keep the tower in place, to keep the clock in place whilst the rest of the scheme was developed. But the intention will be that will be incorporated, not that in that position, but we'll be incorporating either the clock and the monitor, or something that references that within the scheme. I think the issue is whether it's actually retrievable in terms of operationally retrievable, and there's no point in having something that doesn't work. But if we can, that's what we want to do. We want to keep that piece as a reference back, and through then the design, which we've talked about in terms of the mill, the textiles through to the newspaper industry and that folding. There will be very strong references here. And we obviously got the reference now to the headline building. Headline obviously is the headline of the Yorkshire Post.
Thank you. And again, it will be part of the final application.
It will be part of the final application.
Can I just raise a few points? You talk about the new artwork celebrating the industrial heritage of the site, which is good. The Yorkshire Post obviously springs to mind, but it actually was Beaning's woolen mill beforehand, even more famous than the Yorkshire Post, I hesitate to say in this room, but it was. It was one of the first fully integrated cloth processings in the world, and I'd like to see somehow that's celebrated as well. So something to consider. You can read all up about it. It was demolished, I believe, in the mid-60s. Incidentally, when I first come to Leeds, I actually remember it. It clearly wouldn't be allowed to be demolished today, but at the time, perhaps we're not as enlightened as we are now. And the other thing is when we were on site, members walked the site near the headline building, and we noticed, although the headline building had limited car parking, there was a lot of unauthorised parking that's not planning permission along the wall, which means there's a lot more cars on that site than we ever envisaged with the headline building. So Terry did say it was owned by one site, but you've taken it over and you've worked with it since 2014. So I think that needs to be looked at closely. It's no good of us agreeing to a small number of cars and then suddenly they're parked on roadways where they shouldn't be. I think members on site was very disappointed in that. And I know we'll be taken up by planners for enforcement on it. But it's really got to stop. It could have been nicely landscaped instead of having all-day parking. It's totally against our policy anyway for long parking, thing like that. And it butts a multi-storey car park. So there's absolutely no need for it. So it was a very enlightening visit for a number of us today to walk and see that. And we will have to investigate that. So you might put that message across and you might give us assurance that when you say the number is small, that's the number we get and not additional unauthorised parking. Okay, can we move on then?
Sorry, can I just answer that question for you? Yep. When we first completed the development of that first building, there wasn't such an issue with fly parking as there is, but I think people in Leeds have started to realise that it is unenforced. So we're already putting measures in place to prevent that. So we've got an ANPR system going in for vehicle recognition, which will prevent all of that. So that's already been instructed and we're just waiting to get that installed.
We did see a sign in there that said permit holders only from the residents of the headline building.
Yeah, agreed.
So it seems that there is some responsibility from the management company.
There is definitely responsibility by the management company, and that's what we're dealing with at the moment, getting this ANPR vehicle recognition system in place so it'll prevent anybody fly parking and they'll be fined. Because we don't want it either.
Music to my ears. Caroline, did you want to come in on the same subject?
I think you might have written Dan's name down instead of mine, Chair. So yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, just on the Chair's last point, somebody has set up a business and is making money out of permits there. So it clearly needs dealing with. The people parking there probably under the impression they're doing so perfectly legally, having purchased a permit. It's just a point to add. Most of my questions, I'm very pleased to say, have been dealt with, but I'd just like to raise Building B and say it seems to me that there's less active frontage on that building than the other two. And I guess that might impact on the ground level experience. If you've ever walked behind a building like a supermarket that's got inactive, you know, 3 sides inactive, as it were. I just wondered if you could work a bit more interest around building B at ground level. My second point was we walked down to the riverfront and looked along the frontage that would become that riverside walk. And some of the existing trees there appear to have suffered damage in the recent storms and didn't look to be particularly in a good condition. I just wondered if you'd looked at that and whether you could carry out any works to improve the condition of those trees and perk them up a little bit. They weren't looking too good to me, and it's a very important part of that experience. You've clarified the Yorkshire Post clock issue. I think I understand now that your first intention is to restore the clock and temperature gauge if you can. And the second plan B, if you can't do that, is to reimagine it. So yeah, I get that. And a lot's been said about wind, but can you just take us through those model wind baffles that you've got and where they will be and how they can be greened up and what they might look like and whether they would contribute to the art part of the project?
Hi members, we have just passed around a board that shows the location of the biophilic structures, the wind mitigation features. Again, just so hopefully it gives you a better view, but on the plan that's on screen now, the circle in the top left, we've put an arrow to where the biophilic structures will sit. The intention is they do sit on the corner of Wellington Street and Wellington Bridge Street. So they're on a very prominent frontage as well, so we're keen that they're well designed. As we say, we need to obviously do the final wind tunnel test because the key is making sure they do address the microclimate, but the intention is to bring those structures through as a reference to nature. They have a tree canopy, and where we can bring climbing plants from low level to give some greening and enhance biodiversity. On the building B, if we could just go to the next slide. When we talk about active frontage, there's always the necessary bins, bikes, things that we need at ground level. So what we've tried to do, building B is probably the one, because we did not see that as a major pedestrian route. When people are moving through the site, we've addressed the north-south access in terms of coming from Kirksall Road down to the riverside, coming from the city centre. We've got the active frontage on the corner of building A on the right-hand side, coming down to the riverside. We were very concerned about the end of C, because obviously, in effect, because you can't get under the bridge, it is a dead end. We wanted to make sure there was active frontage on there. I mean, I do it, we've all moved through the city. You choose your routes as well, and you want to make sure that you feel safe. But if someone did go down the riverside by accident, we're trying to make sure we've got active frontage on that area. Building B is the part we do not see a lot of pedestrian movement around, but there isn't a barrier to Wellington Bridge Street. So there's not a high fence along there. So there should be natural surveillance between those two parts. But part of, as we say, it is being able to get the cycle provision and the refuse in at low level and trying to maximise active frontage wherever possible. Hopefully that addresses the active frontage part. I think we've talked about the clock tower, and then it's the trees. Obviously, we are undertaking an arboricultural survey as part of our supporting documents for the planning submission, and obviously we'll pick up those trees that you've mentioned in the riverside at that point.
Tim, just for the sake of clarity, the highway officer, Lisa, isn't sure what we decided on this disabled parking. I thought you were saying that we could accommodate it. So could we have some clarity on that, please?
So we will accommodate the relevant level of disabled car parking according to your standards within the scheme. And that'll be within the build to rent and anything that needs to be provided for the student accommodation. That will be at grade, and the build to rent obviously will be within that building. Sorry.
That's great, Tim. Thanks for that. Can we move on to comments? Members who want to comment? Any hands? Councillor Latty.
Yes. I think we've gone through over just recent years, we've had a bit of a sort of a dull time. We haven't had some of the super buildings that we were getting. Today has been a bit like a renaissance. You know, we've had a couple of really nice applications, and I congratulate you on this. In spite of the of questions and things that might have been directed at it, I think that here you've got something which is going to really enhance an important spot in Leeds. It's a real gateway site, is this, and I can see this being something really special. I'm not too thrilled with the little trees to dissipate wind. They look lovely on their own, but when you showed us the picture of those alongside the building, I think they do rather detract. But you've got to still the wind, haven't you? So you've got to do something. No, I think you're doing a good job here. And I look forward to seeing it actually happening on the ground.
Thank you, Councillor Latty. Councillor Walshaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very much agree with Councillor Latty's comments, actually. I think we've seen two really thoughtful presentations this afternoon. This was excellent. It was really clear, lots of answers. Even it's not really a relatively early stage. There's an awful lot of work gone into this, and that was clear for all to see. I actually do like the wind baffling trees. I think they're a really, really interesting idea. There's an awful lot of good work being done here. I'm just really rather keen to see it come forward as a full application with an appropriately strong story to tell on the climate emergency. That's going to be essential for us. But apart from that, Chair, I'm really, really pleased with what we've seen today.
Thank you, Neil. Al, please.
Yes, I like it all as well. I like the trees. I like the ideas about the public art. I like the openable windows, and I was going to make the point that you made about in 10 years' time, a lot more cars will be electric, and that Bridge Street will not be quite so hideous as it is now, because it really is awful. And yes, I'm happy with this, but obviously, and look forward to more detail when it comes back.
Thank you all. Don't see any more comments. Can I know it's a bit early, but can I thank you for bringing and providing us with so much detail? The model was extremely useful. And like members have already said, I do like the sort of wind baffling trees that can be planted up and greened. And when I compared that to Bridgewater Place, where they've got sort of aeroplane wings that look horrible over the pavement, I think it's a much improvement, and you might have set a standard that we'd be looking to see in future. But thank you for that, and thanks for all the samples you provided. It's been extremely useful. Can we go on to the questions I've got in front of me? Okay. The first one: do members support the emerging proposals in respect of the principle of student/residential development? That's a yes. Do members support the proposed emerging approach to landscaping and pedestrian connectivity? Yep. And finally, do members support the emerging approach to car parking provision? Yep. Yep. Okay. Sorry? Did I? Which one did I miss?
No, that's it. That's on the previous one.
Is it?
No, I think you're right. I think.
Yeah. The answer is yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Okay. Did I get it right?
I think you got it right. They must have a different report.
I think it's two different reports. But anyway, the answer was yes, so we'll settle for that. Can I thank you for that presentation? Most interesting, very thought-provoking, particularly around the microforest. I'm really thrilled to see how that's going to develop. I shall be watching it very closely. And if I get down to London, I will visit Somerset's house. And thank you for telling us that, David. So can I wish you good afternoon? Sorry? Is there? Ah. Yeah, that's true. They do, don't they? Okay, so we'll have to get down the summer before the winter comes in. The next meeting is on the 21st of April, and I'll see you all then.